Yeah, man, I guess we're good to go. And again, man, I want to talk about your story and how it became a problem and an issue for you, dude, because I think that's something that needs to be talked about. And a lot of people don't know how a gambling addiction comes about. And I think that you bringing some light onto your own story would be great. And then we can just ping pong after that.
So, my very first recollection of ever gambling on anything, and I bring this up in certain interviews because I think when you ask the first gambling experience, I have to say when I was a kid, I remember on occasion getting scratch off lottery tickets in birthday cards. And this, it was a rare thing on holidays too. And it was never promoted as gambling. It was just kind of like a little trinket I'd get as a gift. And I remember really from a little age, young age, being so intensely fixated on them. I really loved them. And that was my first real image of when I ever gambled. But if you want to talk about the sports betting, because that's really, I feel mainly like what we're here to talk about is the sports betting, getting addicted to that.
Hmm.
I'd say it really started before the first bet on on an individual game. I'd say when I was in middle school, I got involved in fantasy baseball with my friends at school. And so it was a season long thing. You put in 20 bucks each and essentially manage a team for the entire year. And then whoever wins that league gets a certain prize. But I wasn't in it for the financial aspect of it. I liked the idea of being smarter than my friends. I liked the idea of knowing more about baseball. I mean, I was obsessed with baseball. I was the world's biggest Astros fan, being from Houston. And when they would lose, I'd like throw a meltdown, even just as a kid. So, fantasy baseball, we did that. I mean, all through middle school, all through high school. And I remember at the very end of high school, like senior year of high school, this was 2016. One of my friends found out about DraftKings. This is when it was like just getting started. So, DraftKings Daily Fantasy, one of my friends introduced some of our other friends to it. And we were doing like $1 entries in a group together. There was a feature where you could make a group contest. And so we were, doing $1, no big deal. But when I was on my own, even in my senior year of high school, I remember that I found you could do lineups outside of just baseball. So I was doing golf lineups in school. It was just because I wanted to pass the time. It was senior year. I already had a feeling where I was going to go to college. Like, what the hell else am I going to do sitting in AP stat class while the professor's droning on?
Mm.
So I was putting in MMA lineups, hockey, golf, and I experienced a huge win from the hockey lineup. Just randomly inputting players, I got third place out of thousands of entries.
Wow.
And yeah, but the thing was, it was, people are always talking about, oh, the gambler starts because of some huge big win early on. And you think, oh, some dude hit a jackpot for 10 grand or whatever. For me, it was putting in a quarter and winning like a tank of gas. It was like 35 bucks. But I was sending the photos of my win to all my friends. I was bragging about it. So these are these early things, like mentally, if you picture, I don't know. Well, I'm sure we'll talk more about both of our experiences later, but
Right.
like the that mental early big win, like, oh, I'm a man, I'm a
The,
boss. So
the
I
the
love,
ego,
yeah,
the stroke of
yeah.
ego you get from that. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that was huge, and so that was great. And I went off to college and thought, well, okay, I'm gonna have to curb this for a little bit because shoot, I'm off in college. Like my parents are paying for me to get a degree. This is a distraction. So I wasn't addicted. Yeah, I loved it, but I wasn't addicted to. I put DraftKings aside. My fantasy league was a way to keep in touch with my boys from high school. So it was like a social endeavor,
Hmm.
right? It
Yeah.
was like, and we used the group chat as a way to just catch up, and we had all sorts of inside jokes, all that sort of thing. So I stayed in that league. And then sophomore year of college, 2017, is when I first got introduced to just straight up sports betting.
Right.
But let me slow down for a second. Because I told you I had the scratch offs, and I feel like I'm kind of jumping around a little bit because my mind, I'm so much I want to cover. So let me slow it down. Because also in high school, I failed to mention that there was a casino app that I had already started using.
Right. Okay.
That my habits on this app were already, I'd say, problematic. Like when you talk about problematic gambling. So
And these are
um,
strictly casino games.
correct. Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I'll clarify. So it was an app called, well, I feel like I don't want to name everything because I don't, well, anyway, it was Big Fish Casino was what it was called. It
Okay.
was like a game that your grandma plays on Facebook. Like
Right.
that's how I found it was on Facebook. And so I figured out very quickly that I could scam the system. And I was in high school. I have no knowledge about computer hacking or anything, but I found out I could make bogus email addresses and keep registering for new accounts. And then I would copy and paste the top users' names and just like add a number to it. So if the top user on the app was John, I would just make like John 2. And then I would copy and paste their profile photo and make it mine. And then add up all their friends and say, hey, this is John. My account got hacked and I'm starting from scratch. Can you send me some chips to help me get going? And
Oh,
I'll pay you
wow.
back. And so all these poor old people were falling for it. And then I would just funnel all the chips to my main account and just stay up late playing roulette. And I love the whole atmosphere. So this is why this is important to bring up, because this, even as a kid, like I loved buying virtual drinks for the whole table on an online roulette lobby,
Right.
and I felt like I was the man making these schemes and these plays online. So, and I was doing this all without my parents or anyone knowing. That was how easy it was. It's like I had the iPad because my parents actually were looking out for me and had me take it to school to take notes
Right.
because I had
So
it focused. So,
sorry to interrupt you there, Saul, but
no, go ahead.
so what you just said about how you were doing it undercover where your parents didn't know about it. So a part of you obviously knew that there was something wrong with doing this kind of thing at that age even. You knew that there was this negative and toxic path that you were going on, even though it wasn't that big of a deal and it was just some random stupid app that you were using, but you knew deep down that this it's like one of those things with the casino. I remember, and so I don't want to go off a tangent, but
No, go ahead, please.
since
Yeah.
a young kid, I mean, even as far as I can remember, I always knew that the casino was a place of just degeneracy. I just knew that from movies and TV shows and what people used to talk about casinos and what my mom used to say about gambling and stuff like that. So like it was sort of, I've always known that about casinos and gambling. I feel like with gambling and casinos, that's something you know from a very young age. Like it's introduced to you that it's not the cleanest thing to do.
Well, that's a good point. But oddly enough, my experience on that app was almost conflated in thinking when I would see these people adding more chips to their account while at the table and buying everyone gifts. In my mind, for whatever reason, I convinced myself these people had a ton of money and these were the big players. But
Mm.
then now looking back on it, I think these were likely elderly people, lonely people, because they were spending so much time on the app and money. And it was not even playing for real money. It was using real money to buy virtual currency. And so looking back on it now, I think, well, these were not people that were raking in money. They were very vulnerable people. But you're right though. I mean, like the casino, it's like my parents wouldn't go hang around a casino. Maybe they went to Vegas once in a couple years. Like it wasn't
Mm.
ever something that was, encouraged. So it's a good point. But I did feel the need to just bring up that story because I talked about the scratch offs. That wasn't even really like a huge deal. It was really just the first introduction I think I had to it. And then I felt like, well, skipping from fantasy to the sports betting, a little incomplete without thinking of how I was kind of the menace of Big Fish Casino and how I loved staying up till 2 a.m. playing roulette on my iPad, like it's kind of primed me to make that jump once again once I was ready to get back into all the online gambling. It's like, well, I'd already had that first cup of coffee, it's like not a big deal again, right back to it.
With the sports betting, just the whole timeline with that.
Yeah, completely. So I went off to a small school called Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. And my freshman year, so that's when I was still doing my fantasy leagues. I kind of put DraftKings aside and felt like I didn't really do a whole lot for my social life. I joined a fraternity thinking that that would make me cool in college. And I found that I was kind of, I don't know about ostracized, but seen as different. I mean, kind of made fun of a little, being a little weird, And so sophomore year, I thought, well, I need to get more involved on campus. So I had an interest in sports broadcasting, sports writing. I was there for a communication degree. So I joined our sports channel there. It's almost like an ESPN Sports Center knockoff. We had End Zone.
Right.
So any End Zone viewers out there, check in. But it was our sports show, and I was one of the anchors. And
Cool.
my first sports bet was on a Wednesday because that's when End Zone was, and I remember exactly where I was. So it was September 20th, 2017, and I was just about to. I think we were just ending the show, and I got a message on my phone from a friend of mine who I'd played in fantasy leagues with, and he had messaged me on Facebook and said, "Hey, I got a bookie, like for sports betting.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a bookie, and why don't you hop in on it?" And he talked me up, like he boosted my ego in his request. He said, "You've always helped me with my fantasy lineup. Like you're so good at this. Why don't you hop in?" The crazy thing, Mo, is that I was thinking like very rationally when he asked me. I was thinking very rationally, and I thought, well, I don't have a job. Like I'm here because my parents have paid for it and given me some allowance for food and groceries, whatever. So I was skeptical, and I thought, well, that's risky. Like if I'm doing this, I'm going to be risking money that I'm not even really earning. But I looked at the lineup that night. I looked at the slate of MLB games going on that night. It was late season baseball, pretty meaningless for non-contenders, right? Just like late season baseball. And I saw the Royals against the Blue Jays, and I thought, well, I love the Royals in that matchup. These teams are both below 500, like they weren't making the playoffs.
Yeah. Just dog shit teams.
yeah, exactly. But I saw that the Blue Jays pitcher was like he was injury prone. I thought, well, I'll take the Royals. So
right.
I said, you know what? Give me that bookie's number. Like, oh yeah, I'm in, sure. And so bookie, I never even saw the guy's face or ever knew his name. Really, it was just some like kid from New York or something. That, I was supposed to Venmo him, and then on like an honor system, he would Venmo me if I won the bet. Okay. So I was like, okay, $10 on the Royals, right? And believe it or not, like the craziest thing, and this is all relevant. I promise this is all relevant. So
by all means, brother.
It was awesome. Well, it stood out to me that game, in the second inning of this game, the score was already 9-0 in my favor. And like you think of the average baseball game, the score is like 1-0 in the fourth inning, like moves along at a slow pace. No, out the gate, my team was like we had won within 10 minutes, Exactly. And
yeah,
I was there on the set of my TV show. Like I was still in the room there, and I was wearing my blazer, bro. I was wearing my like dress shoes, and I was the anchor of the show too. So like I was the head cheese of the whole operation. So that feeling of being like in power, being the next Scott Van Pelt on ESPN or whatever, and also having this bet winning 9-0 in the second inning, like, dude, it was like I was on my
like I love how you're bringing the fact that like what you were doing, you were on set, combined with the fact that you just won. It's like this euphoric feeling of your God, your Zeus.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, dude, like I've read an article like some guy who couldn't get tased because he was on PCP or like he was on some heavy drug. Like that's what I liken that experience to. Is like I was invincible. Like you couldn't tase me in that moment because I was on top of the world. So,
Right.
and I was bragging to people too, man. I was like telling my friends, "Oh, I had this game going, 9-0." And as soon as we got out of the production room, I bolted straight to the computer lab in that same building to catch the rest of the game. And you'd think if you were up, because they eventually were up like 13-0 in the sixth inning, you'd think at that point you could just go on about your day and just assume you won or check in later. But I
Right.
was glued to every single pitch, and they won 15-5. And so the guy sent me my money, and I was okay. That it was like something I'd been missing because I've always had friends and I've always been kind of a funny guy, but I've never felt like I was cool or like I had any sort of authority or anything. And
Mm.
this was
So
like, this could be my thing.
a few things on that, Saul, because did you win the bet before you went on the broadcast? Or
No, the bet concluded. It was after the fact. It was like I had found out from the friend, I want to say like right as the broadcast was getting started that he had the bookie or whatever. And then by the time the broadcast was over, like the game had just started. So the
because
game hadn't ended until after I went to the computer lab, watched the rest of it.
right, okay. Because what I was trying to get to, my point I was trying to get to is that the satisfaction and the fulfillment you got from doing that podcast, let's say you had found out before you started the podcast that you had
Oh, I see.
won the
Right.
bet, you
Yeah.
would have walked into the broadcast just on cloud nine, full of confidence, enthusiasm. You would have probably had the best broadcast episode of your life, right? And
I think so. Yeah, I think
and
so.
and one thing that I've noticed, man, and I don't want to bring this back to me right now, and
Please
I
do, because it's both of our conversations. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I I noticed when I was in the thick of betting, dude, the things that would give me fulfillment before, like whether it was going to the gym, having a good round in golf, hanging out with a friend, doing an episode on a podcast. Like these are things that naturally should give me happiness and joy and a sense of fulfillment, but it was always connected. Like I always attached it to, well, how much better could I feel if I win $500 on top of the fact that I just had a sick round in golf, or on top of the fact that I just had an amazing episode. Like it was never enough to just do those things that would naturally and at one point brought me pure happiness. It would still bring me the same happiness, but it's also like, well, fuck, like, what if, why can't I just be up $300 right now on top of that? It's as if those things that I just mentioned, the good things that I was doing, golf, episode, working out, weren't enough anymore. It was like, okay, I also need to win a couple bands off this parlay.
No, that's interesting you say that, and this jumps the timeline a little bit, but I have a very vivid recollection that me and my girlfriend at the time went out on the Riverwalk in San Antonio with some of our friends, and one day we were talking, I don't know, a month after, 2 months after, of how nice that night was. It was a great time, and I was thinking, oh yeah, because I had this, I straight up said, oh, I had this parlay with the Reds and the Cardinals and this, and I won like $1,400, and it bothered her. Like, is that what you were thinking of the whole night? Is that where your focus was? And
Mm,
truthfully, the answer was yes, but you know,
yeah.
lie about
Going back to your story, I think one thing I wanted to touch on, and I sent you a message before we got on a podcast a few days ago. I think, and I want you to talk about this. I want your thoughts about this. a lot of people, like the way I remember starting sports betting was a lot on basketball because I was a basketball player. I played college basketball. I like to think I know basketball enough to be able to make an educated bet on whether the fact the Lakers are going to cover or Luka Doncic is going to go over 30 points, right? Like I've played enough basketball and I've watched enough basketball throughout my life to be able to confidently say that I can make somewhat of a educated guess, right? And it really started like that. Like I was like, okay, well, what the fuck? Like, why am I not doing this? This is just side passive income that I could just be making for dinner on the weekend, or this shirt I really want, right? That's how it started, and that's the trap with sports betting. It's all a fucking coin flip. I don't give a fuck. Like I will tell people I don't care if the Dallas Mavericks or who even won. I don't care if
Celtics, yeah.
the Celtics, fuck the Celtics. I don't even care if the Celtics play a North Vancouver high school team and the odds are minus 20,000. It's a coin flip. Like it's really like that, and that's the trap in sports betting. Would you say, or what are your thoughts on that? Just in terms of
Sure.
the people saying, well, it's not really gambling when you have Jason Tatum on the other side and some G League guy that just got called up on a 10-day because all their players are injured. Still, it's a coin flip.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my experience, so I started betting on MLB, NFL, NBA, and even then I was doing a lot of that just from intuition because I like the idea of my gut feeling being the authority over reality. It was like a control thing, which I was less based on a lot of research. But I'll say from what I've experienced just in the couple years of sports betting is that well, just mathematically, it's not 50-50. Like you have to win more than 50% of your bets to even break even or to come out ahead because of the way the lines are set, right? I mean, like if you win, I know like you'll see guys online that post their 8-2 in the last 10 bets. You come bet with our tips, and they'll have bet a team that was favored, like they're like minus 500 or something, like the Yankees against the White Sox, and it's like the two times they lost means they've lost money over those last 10 games anyway. So that's one aspect of it. Second of all, I mean, there's just so much you can't account for on a daily night. I mean, what do they say? Like any given Sunday, right, for football, that any team can upset another team, which I guess is really what you're getting at there. You think of a sport like baseball and you're betting on a game over a 162 game season. It's like just because it's Kershaw on the mound. Well, what about when the guys come in from the bullpen, or what if he blows up that night? I mean, you can't say for certainty, which obviously you can't because it's a gamble, it's a risk, it's a chance. And what's especially dangerous, I think, in my estimation, is you have a lot of young men who are betting on sports, and I would say there's probably a lot of young men out there like myself who have very poor impulse control. And I've been on like ADD meds since I was little kid, like 5-6 years old, and I think like someone like me who doesn't, I mean, and I'm not trying to even excuse myself. I'm saying just point blank, this is a reality. Someone who makes impulsive decisions frequently, to put them in front of an online gambling platform where they're able to bet 24/7 with no thought, no research, no bankroll management or anything. You're just going straight into it. It's alarming, to say the least, to think of what that's going to look like.
Man, I'm just going to ask you, how dangerous do you think sports betting is? How much of a downfall is it going to be for society in the foreseeable future? Because it's gained a lot of fucking steam over the past 4 or 5 years. What are your thoughts on that?
I think when talking about how dangerous it could be, I would quantify it in terms of the next 5 years, the next 10 years, because at least for me, and I felt that I progressed through gambling very quickly. There's still a progression to it. And, like you start by betting $10 on the Royals, or I start betting $10 on the Royals, and I bet $20, and I bet $20 for a couple of weeks. It's fine. I bet 50. You get where I'm going. It takes a while to really see it. Plus, between all those progressions, guys are winning. You're winning some, and then you're able to pay your debt. So no one sees it as a big deal. And there's moments where it can be covered by adding a second job. So if that makes sense, it's like, okay, some of the effects of this they're not going to be seen for a few years for a lot of these people. So I think it's more of like a progressive danger where it's like in 5 years, you see all these people with suicidal ideation and all this depression, bankruptcy. Like, how did this happen?
Mm.
Well, like take a look at the previous 5 years of how this was steadily growing. I think you asked two parts of that question. You were saying how dangerous is it and what's it going to look like? Like how much further can it go? You know what the crazy thing is, and hope this isn't taken in any weird way, but I feel like people are really only maybe going to take it more seriously when something awful happens. Like if some enraged gambler hurts an athlete or, does something extreme, and then it'll be like, oh, well, why haven't we taken a closer look at this? But it's tough to really say that in good conscience. I'm trying to say, is all gambling evil or bad? And I look at, say you go out with your dad and say, we're going to bet $5 on the game to make it a little more fun. And that's it. You don't bet again for another 2 months. Like, I try not to be so all or nothing, but at the same time, I'm not someone who goes around parading for people to dabble in it and experiment in it, because I know how easy it is with all this online stuff. Like, I feel like, hey, 20 years, you could in good faith say, well, just go bet casually. It's whatever. But like, if you're promoting that now to especially young people, knowing how quick, dude, it's like when you're on Instagram Reels and you have a new bet every 10 seconds. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
damn,
I
I
mean,
can't promote that.
yeah, man. And one thing I want to share my experience, and I want to ask you if you ever got to this
Yeah,
point,
sure.
the gradual progression of starting off at $10, $20, $50. It got to a point for me that putting a bet anything less than 300 was not gonna do it. Was not. It's just it felt like a waste of time, and I felt like I didn't win anything, even though if the bet did win. And I think that's the danger in it, where your tolerance goes higher. So then you get to the point where you're betting $1,000 every single bet. Anything under $1,000 is not even existent. It's not even real, right? And I think that's where it became a problem for me, man, where I wasn't betting anything under $400, right? And I cringe even talking about it. It's interesting because just a couple days ago, I was hanging out with my friend, and I never once in a million years thought that he would be betting on anything. Like, he's not that type of guy. I just assumed. But he's been telling me that he's been putting $1, $2 on random bets on Bet365, some esports. And I said, dude, it's a slippery slope, man. Like, I know you're only betting $1. Like, one of his bets was literally $1.37. And I told him, dude, this is where it starts, man. I'm telling you, it's a fucking slippery slope. If you're ever gonna listen to me for one thing, it's this. Don't do it. And it became so toxic. And what are some of the mental things, man? Like, let's talk about the anxiety and honestly the depression, the isolation that you may have felt from it.
So you bring up some interesting points with that, because at first, so the general progression for me was, yeah, I started with the baseball bet, then I won a football bet that weekend and started getting some more bets. Eventually, what happened was the bookie that I was texting was like, dude, I have a life too, and you're hitting me up all the time. Let me just make you an account on a website, and I'll give you credit and you can just bet through the website, so you don't have to text me all the time. That was how I found out that there were other markets I could bet on. Because otherwise, like in my own mind, I just thought, well, there's baseball, there's basketball, there's football. Being on this website, it's like upcoming events, tennis over in Europe. And I remember, yeah, I was sitting on the toilet and like, oh, damn, there's tennis. Like, oh, I better put that on. Like, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool. I just thought it'd be great. So and I got my friends involved on that at the start in my dorm, like, I don't know, a month and a half, whatever, into it. I would get everyone together, we'd drink some beer, we'd watch some tennis, and quickly these guys were like, yeah, we're not really that interested in it. So it went from being a social thing, the fantasy leagues were a social thing, to really being an isolating activity. And I actually craved that isolation, because for me, the whole gambling, sports betting was a whole world that I was creating for myself. Like, I liked imagining how the game was going to look, because I would track the scores. I wouldn't actually watch the games. And I would go walking in the woods near my school, just checking the games on my own dream world. So it was very isolating. But as far as the emotional nature of it goes, it was just such a crash and burn, man, because my mom had like seen I was making Venmo transactions for the bets within, early on. And she had told me, well, it's not a good idea. It's kind of the same stuff you were saying. And I convinced her. It's easy to convince someone because people don't know that much about gambling. So I said, oh, well, it's just something I'm doing on the weekend, just a little sports bet. It's not a big deal. Kind of left me alone. But then when it got really out of hand, like I was owing money to bookies and texting my parents that I needed to bail out. And when that started happening, it was like my parents were concerned,
Mm-hmm.
of course, about the financial aspect of it, but more so of, well, I was starting to lie to them about how involved I was. So it was the lying that distanced that relationship, and like, not knowing who am I involved with? Are these dangerous people, these bookies? Am I going to harm them? Am I going to harm myself? What's happening? So it caused a lot of unknown, a lot of anxiety. And my twin brother was off in college himself, getting reports from my parents of what was going on. And he was worried. So he was anxious over there in his school. And really, it was just totally involved. I couldn't go to class and be focused because I had my phone out checking scores. And then as I started having to lie to people to cover up more of what I was doing, it became a whole difficult process of remembering who I told what to, or who I needed to pay this, or who I needed money from, or how I was going to get credit for the next bet. And gosh, it's just, I really don't know how someone can do that and live any semblance of a life, because it was just a 24/7 endeavor. Even when I was sleeping, I would wake up to see what happened in a late game that I bet on. So hope that gets to some of it.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, no, dude. It's insane how isolating, and there's you actually physically feel like there's a grip on your mind that you can't really shake, and you're not really in reality. Like I'm talking. I'll give you an example. Like, I live in an apartment, right? And I would put a bet on a baseball under, right?
Sure.
For a first inning under 1 run.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
no,
sure.
and our
No runs first inning.
no
Yeah, no,
runs.
yeah, yeah, sure, yeah.
So this is how crazy this is. This is when I knew I was like, okay, there's something wrong. From the time I leave my place and I get into the elevator and I go downstairs my parking lot to get into my car and then drive out of the underground parking, I lose service. And dude, that 3 or 4 minutes of me just getting out of my house, getting into the elevator, going down, getting into my car, driving out of the parking lot, I am in full anxiety, thinking as soon as I get service, I'm gonna get the notification on the score. Boom. Sacrifice fly. I'm not even thinking about where I'm going. The fact that I'm leaving my place to go into my car, I'm just thinking, oh God, oh fuck, here we go. I'm about to get service. Is the notification? And then when it does, it's like a dagger. That's how gripped you are, man. That's how stuck you are, man. It really, and not to not to ramble, man, but I remember there were days where I'd be betting pretty much the whole day, and by the end of the night, where there's literally no games on anymore, 11 p.m., I'm just sitting there like my whole day just went by, and I have no recollection of what I just did. What did I do today? Like I was just sort of going through the motions of my day, but I was totally engulfed by 2 outs, bottom of the fourth inning. Okay, I need who's this next pitcher coming up? Oh, pitcher change, 2-1 count. Like that's all you're thinking of.
That's, it's really, I mean, you touched on something totally true in my experience is that in the moment, it all seems like it's the only thing in the world, yet taking a step back and seeing that all this behavior I did was for no purpose. It was not advancing anything in my life. It was just aimless behavior. But people, here's what I hear all the time when I go to Gamblers Anonymous meetings. People say that they're stupid. That's the word they use all the time. And I'm sure I use that too, saying they're stupid for it and not acknowledging that at a certain point, if it's an addiction, it's an illness of the mind. I mean, it's just a physical transformation of the mind, like chemical transformation. And so I hesitate. I avoid that word saying that I was stupid because really I was not of right mind, really.
Did you ever get to the root of your addiction, Saul? I mean, did you? Because people say it's not a gambling issue, it's an emotional issue. There's a deep rooted thing that's, getting all this out, right? Did you ever, and are you still continuing to work on that?
So I'm right now about to do my step 9 amends. I've been clean from gambling since July 18, 2019. So it's been a little bit of time now. I've come to the sense that as far as that goes, because I agree that it's an emotional illness, I believe that I felt I had to prove something, that I was a success, that I was a big shot. I wanted that admiration. I mean, I felt inferior having a twin brother who was off in an Ivy League school and very successful, put together, and I was always dealing with behavioral issues and always getting reports from the teachers that he had to go get sent out to the principal and going to psychiatrist appointments, sitting in between my parents with some stranger basically like diagnosing me and seeing, does he have Tourette's? Is he autistic? All this. I felt like, what a piece of crap. It was like that feeling of inferiority. I had something that finally made me this big shot. And, I also felt like I needed to prove something to the guys in the fraternity who, they made up a joke. And I mentioned this in Soft White Underbelly of like, GSL, get Saul laid, because like, oh, I was the guy who said he was still a virgin when they were introducing the pledges as a freshman. So like it makes you feel like crap as a college kid who's trying to fit in. So
Yeah.
when I gambled and I was driving around the city bumping like loud, big talk, like a Dallas rapper, the Stunna Man. Like that's what I was convinced I was, like the Stunna Man, the big shot, the CEO, the shot caller. And it's like I felt like I craved that. I needed that to keep going, to motivate myself that I was someone.
Was it strictly the fact of winning the bet, or was it the money aspect that was making?
No, I'd say it was the winning. It was the winning. I mean, I like the idea of the money, and I had convinced myself. I would look at certain days where I'd won some bets, and I thought, if I won 500 this day, all I have to do is win that this day, and then this day, and then this day. And if I do that enough times over enough years, I'll be able to retire when I'm 35 or something. And I would play those scenarios out in my head a lot. But as much as I thought the money would be great, it was really about like winning and being like, just in charge of the whole operation. I started by putting notes on my phone for the first, I don't know, 10, 20 bets. I would take notes of who won, how much I was up, how much I was down. And you could see over time how it was a lot less structured and really just about the action, no note taking. There was no documenting how much I was up or down. And, people will say, well, this guy was just like the world's worst gambler. He had no strategy. He had no bankroll management. He had no idea what he was betting on. I was betting on tennis. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman because it was like Chinese names. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's the world's worst gambler. But
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that, but at the same time, it's like, well, how easy is it to have that escape, especially when I was growing up afraid to drink alcohol or to do drugs, and those things were not ones I really wanted to push the boundaries on. But gambling, I mean, it's called the gaming industry. It's like, oh, I'm just playing a game, and it appears a little innocent.
Would you say a common pathway for a lot of young men is the fact that we live in a society now where your financial status sort of dictates your value, which is completely flawed, but financial competency is a big aspect in whether you're a high value man or not. Do you feel like a lot of men are thinking that sports betting, getting this quick buck, oh, I could be up $2,000 today. I'm a god. I'm an alpha male. I'm a high value man. Do you think that's a big motive to why a lot of young men are getting into this? I could say for me personally, that is a big part of it. If I win $2,000, I'll be able to win that bracelet, or I'll be able to buy that bracelet that looks cool so I can impress this person. So this person thinks I'm some sort of hot shot. Or if I win enough, I can win a trip. I can buy a trip to Mexico where I can hang out and make it seem like I'm living a great life and an extravagant. Like, that's where my deep rooted thing, where I'm just feel like I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's I see so much on Instagram now of like looks maxing, and having to be like the next Andrew Tate, things like that. And I think that certainly social media and societal expectations could be very influential in how young men especially are being motivated to gamble, especially on sports, where, like you had also said earlier, people are conflating it with being an investment, right? So I do think that there's a whole sort of bravado about being a sports bettor, being a gambler, and it plays into the idea that you do have to start hustling by the time you're a young guy. There's such a hustle culture, and I don't know if you see it a lot on Instagram yourself, but I see a lot of guys who say, oh, I sell real estate courses and I was able to scale to 9 figures by the age of 23. And it's like, dude, there's a million guys like that posting out there on Instagram. So if I'm Joe Schmo and I'm an 18-year-old kid who has very little money, or I'm in college and I'm bored, I want to be that guy. I want to be the next Andy Elliott or something. So I can do that through gambling.
Yeah, a lot of seeing that on social media, comparing yourself to others. Well, fuck, like I need to hurry up. I need to. It's like this quick, impatient. I need something. Give me. Okay, I'll win $1,000 here. That's closer to this guy that's making 6 figures, right? But it's such a toxic thing, man. And what would you say to someone that is going through it right now?
Well, so I'll give you the little brief rundown. I mean, eventually, so it got to where I was feeling suicidal, that I lost a relationship, lost all the money, the family. I was still obsessed with gambling. I couldn't function. So what really for me had helped, still helps, is Gamblers Anonymous. It helps me because I have a community of like-minded people, and I have a sponsor who is really like a guide through the steps of the program. It's a 12-step program. So each step outlines a certain character change, certain action. And so I find that to be very practical to make different changes beyond just stopping gambling, doing different character changes in daily life. It's been really helpful. But I mean, really, if you were to talk to someone now and give them some sort of suggestion or to speak from personal experience, I would personally say to be open minded, and that's been what had saved me in GA, was that I finally got out of my own mind and was willing to listen to people that had previously gotten abstinent from gambling as well as built up happy, decent lives. Because one of the problems that I've encountered is that thinking I know so much about who's going to win, even if it's based on intuition and not reality. It's like I still have this sense that I'm smart. I'm smarter than the game, smarter than everyone. That'll shut me down to taking in new information, new ideas. And I think, like, I've heard it since I was a little kid: be coachable, be coachable. So that's what I would say to someone who's struggling. If they go to a support meeting or they see a therapist or something, is to have an open mind, because that closed mind will shut things down. And I feel like a gambling addiction is just totally based on the struggle, that I'm going to beat this addiction, I'm going to outsmart it, and that it's a battle, it's a struggle.
Do you still get that itch and those cravings just when you're watching a game? You think of the over-unders, the odds. Do you still have that?
I don't really get cravings, like intense cravings to gamble so much now, but I won't say I'm cured from it or that it won't happen. I will say that I do have an issue, a struggle still with moderating sometimes how much I'm looking at the Astros, because I'm still a Houston sports fan. And it can be interfering sometimes, not going to lie. Like, I'll catch myself checking the Astros score when I'm out a bunch. It's like, okay, put the phone away. This is too much. And I'm not purposely, I don't feel like I'm pushing myself to want to bet on it, or I'm not imagining what the line is or anything. It's like, I'm just an Astros fan and I love seeing that they're doing well.
But I don't see anything wrong in that though, right?
No, I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong in being a fan, checking the score. I would say when it starts interfering, like throughout a dinner, and I sometimes find myself like, oh, I keep taking the phone out, and I have to wait till this at bat's over. It's like that can get a little bit fixated, but you're right. I mean, I don't think it has to be such an extreme, like, oh, you never see how they're doing. I mean,
Right.
I think it's fine to be a Houston sports fan. It's all right.
Man, I want you to be honest. All these Twitter guys, YouTube guys that have their shows and give their daily picks and have these whole like little like group meetings of them sharing each other's picks and why they're gonna go, and people having their fucking just analytical charts. It's all horse shit. Would you say it's all horse shit?
I mean,
Like, let's be honest here.
no, I mean, I want to. I feel like I want to say that, but if I say they all are, I haven't seen every single one, so I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
But by and large, the whole concept, I think, is shady. I think that's a good word to say. I mean, I think there's more than meets the eye with a lot of that stuff. I mean, if it were genuine, like, why would some guy want to? If some guy is making thousands of dollars every time he places a bet, why doesn't he just do that? Like, what's the point of selling them and having other people influence the line that you have? Right? It doesn't make sense. I think it's dangerous too. Yeah, I mean, if you're getting a bunch of gullible, I don't know about gullible, maybe naive, easy to influence people who are starting to pay these people for picks. Yeah, it's not ideal.
You have those guys where, like, I don't know if you know Trent. Have you heard of Trent?
No, who's that?
He's this fucking he's more of a personality now, where he's just a bit of an influencer because he's such a goof and he's so funny. But that's his thing, that's his brand, sports betting. But he's just
Okay.
he's just a really big goof, and it's gone to the point where you go against Trent. Whatever he puts, you go against.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so like that's also kind of like a thing where me and my friend were so like invested in this guy because he was so funny to start with, but then we would also bet against him because it's like fuck this guy, fuck Trent, you know what I mean? So then it became, it's become this whole culture, man. Like I said, like there's sports betting's gone its own slang. Like you got the way people talk about these things, like one thing Trent says is like, I want to feel something today. Or if it's a bad loss, it's he just is frozen, you know, and it's becoming this thing where it's fun. It's a whole culture. It's gone past
Yeah,
the
I can
point
see
of
that.
just
Sure.
making money and winning the bet.
Yeah, it does seem like really, I mean, even since I stopped gambling in 2019, it's like a subculture, really. It's like an online culture. So I think that really also blocks people out from seeing the possible addiction to it. It's like with my fantasy leagues with my friends, like that was how we had fun. That was how we had our social. And imagine all the group texts out there of like degens, degenerates, this and that. Like if all of those just shut down, what would these guys do with their social life? What would they would lose out on all the other stuff that comes with it. It's a whole lifestyle. So I think that's difficult as well to divorce oneself from.
It's gross, man. It's gross. And can someone ever get back to just betting for fun on a UFC main event or the Super Bowl or a really, really important game? Can someone that was once a compulsive gambler get back to that point, or are they just toast?
I don't think they can. I haven't seen that. I haven't experienced that.
Yeah.
If it's out there, then I'd be happy to see it. But I certainly don't plan to test the waters because
Yeah.
I've tried that before, and I've being compulsive, being addicted. I've tried the old idea of I'm going to buy a $1 scratch off because it's not a big deal. Then if I lose, it's like, well, that wasn't a big deal. Let me go gamble again. If I won, I remember I won on a dollar scratch off. Well, shit, it was a dollar scratch off. I'm just gonna use that money to gamble more. And then I won a $5 scratch off, then I won a couple $100, and then I was back into sports betting.
Mm,
So there's no way around it,
right.
I think. It's like once you cross that line, you can't cross it back.
One thing and I don't want to go for too much longer, Saul, because, we're already at an hour and 7 minutes, which is great. But I've recently talked to my therapist about this, right? And I come from a background where I don't need the money, right? I come from a financially stable household. I've gone everything I've ever wanted. I've never felt that I was in a place of, I can't have that because we can't afford it. I've never had that issue, and I'm very privileged for that, and I'm very grateful for that, right? And I'm not, people are going to watch this and be like, well, he's a trust fund kid. No, well, there's a lot to it, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I wasn't privileged. And one thing that me and my therapist talked about was, because for me, when I was betting, what does the extra grand or 2 grand even going to do for me? I mean, I don't really need it. So that was a part of why it was so enabling, and I could justify the fact that I could afford to lose $800 right now, is because I know I could just get it right back. Whereas someone, let's say, I mean, he gave the example, a homeless person, them winning that 1 grand is 20 times more significant than you winning that 1 grand. You don't really need that 1 grand, Mo. Like, that 1 grand isn't really gonna change your life in any way. You're gonna be down $800 if you lose, but that $800 is just a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. And to be honest with you, I don't really know where my point is going with this, but I remember having this conversation with my therapist, and it kind of opened my eye. Well, it's like, okay, well, why am I betting the $800? And he gave me some homework where he was telling me, well, okay, so when you feel like betting, because I asked him, I said, okay, when I have these urges that I want to bet, what do I do? Like, what do I do? Because it's a craving and I'm itching for it. And he told me, okay, well, consider the bet you're going to be putting on, the bet you're going to be doing. It's going to be taking 3 hours of your life away. For example, a baseball game. In those 3 hours, what is that going to be taken away? What is that bet going to be taking away from you? For example, like if you're going to be going golfing and you put that bet in, you're going to be totally focused on that bet rather than the actual golf. And that's true. And that's very much the truth for me. Like whenever I put in a bet, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. It could be at a concert. I'm not focusing on the concert. I am partially, but I'm really just like you said, like I'm opening up my phone. So he was telling me, what is it going to be taken away from you? And are you willing to not be present in that time? Like I think, I mean, I think that's how the conversation kind of went. And I honestly don't really remember the point of this, but that was just really interesting to me. I don't know.
I think what you bring up about the amount of money, because I'm the same way. I mean, I'm fortunate to have grown up in a family that provided everything and then some, I guess, and I don't feel like I was spoiled. I felt like my parents are very, you know, um, I don't know what the word is
Hardworking,
that
they
I'm
earn
looking
their
for,
money. I
but
mean, they're not just,
yeah, I worked hard, but
yeah, of
I
course.
felt like they didn't spoil me.
Yeah.
They wouldn't buy me an unnecessary car as my first car. It was like a starter car,
Of
things
course.
like that, where it's like got what I was nice. But I think part of the appeal of winning money was like, okay, this is money that I've accumulated from my own mind. It was like not that my parents worked for, because at a certain point, I mean, I remember my friend group, well, in middle school, we were middle schoolers, and we would look up our parents' houses value versus the teachers'
Wow.
houses value on Zillow, and like, oh, you know, so and so's house is this much more of like, so it was like
Jesus
always
Christ, that is
it's
talking.
like it's
Holy.
like always always our parents, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I wasn't taught that sort of thing. It's just like we were just dumb middle schoolers at a private school. But I guess my point with that was always using someone else's accomplishment as a bragging point. But it's like now with gambling, I can say, yo, I'm up, whatever. This is me. This is all me. So
Yes.
some sort of identity attached to it that I found. But as for what you were saying about the time, yeah, that's a big deal, because one of the questions that I've read, the GA 20 questions, like, did you ever lose time from work or school due to gambling? That's the very first question. The first question isn't did you lose money, it's did you lose time? And I think to where I was physically present in places, but I was losing time because of what you mentioned of being mentally preoccupied. So it's like the whole day was just
Hmm.
gone. But I think what's been so important about GA, I mean, and I'm not trying to be like the GA spokesperson. I know it's an anonymous group, but for me, it worked. For me, it's worked. And
Yeah.
I found that it's great to have some sort of, it's built my faith just, and I'm not really very religious, but just faith out in the world, like just that there's something outside of me, like there's God outside of me
Higher
that's
power. Yeah.
I'm trusting. Yeah, higher power that I'm just trusting. And when I talked about being open-minded earlier, that was really my point, is like just at a certain point I saw these people who were living happy lives, and I'm like, okay, screw it. Like I see that they're happy, so I'm just going to throw everything I know out the window. I have nothing left to lose. And I think that can be such a beautiful point to be, a beautiful place to be in life, is nothing left to lose. I'm just going to try something completely different and just roll with it. And I see it starting to work, and that builds up my confidence in it even more. And it just keeps rolling, progressively trending positively. It's like the inverse of the progression of the addiction. The
Right.
recovery is also progressive.
I
Yeah.
love that, man. Just to end this, dude, are there any things, because I feel like there's so many things you can just go over with sports betting. Are there any things on your mind that you just want to talk about sports betting, that some things that people might not know about, some interesting facts about sports betting, some flaws that aren't, some things that aren't real and are just smoke and mirrors, because I'm genuinely interested and curious to know. I think people need to understand again that sports betting is gambling. It's not an investment. You're not making any educated guesses on the games. But
Yeah. Yeah.
is there anything like fun facts, anything honestly, man, because it's just with sports betting, I think it just needs to be fucking cycle.
I think Well, I think what I would say, and I suppose this is not unique to sports, so I hope this is still an answer that's worth putting out there. But something that really catches my eye with the online stuff specifically is that the money doesn't seem real when it's numbers being loaded on a screen. And I think that's just important as another teaching point to young people, is the value of a physical dollar. What does that equal in terms of working hours and things? Because I will again emphasize that I agree that gambling addiction is an emotional illness with financial implications, but I think lack of financial knowledge will make it easier to experiment with risky sports betting. So I think what I'd say about sports betting online for me is that I had no clue what $500 actually was, because it was just 500 credit. It's just non-existent. It's like, what is, in the Wolf of Wall Street? It's a Fugazi, it's a whatever. It doesn't exist. But if you actually were to count 500 $1 bills out on a table, that could be a good exercise for a kid who's sports betting. You take $500 in ones and just count them all out. How long do you have to work to actually make this? If you have to work as a waiter or something, damn.
That's very interesting, because I agree with you 100%, man. Because at a certain point, I was like, these are just like gold coins. These are little like video game, like Club Penguin, fucking
Webkins or something. Yeah,
gold stars. Woo! Like, yeah. I agree, man. Dude, this has been great. Thank you again for coming on and talking about your story and being very vocal about this, man. And I see you doing your thing, man, going on doing public speaking, software.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Seminars. Yeah. What are some things coming up for you that you're going to be doing in terms of public speaking? And
sure. Thanks for throwing that out there. Actually, on Tuesday, I'm doing another training online with a group in Massachusetts called Riverside Community Care, like going over some training stuff with their staff for gambling. And then, dude, I'm super excited. Mental Health America, their national conference, is in a couple weeks in DC, and I'm one of the presenters there talking about youth gambling. And then later the end of this month, going up to Connecticut to speak at Fairfield University. So it's getting busier. All the speaking engagements are really picking up, because then October I'm back to Houston for one of the private schools in my area, and then booked like a webinar at the end of the month of October. So I'm stacking them up, man, and I'm fortunate.
Awesome, man. Yeah, dude. I mean, you definitely have the voice and the enthusiasm.
Thank you.
For sure, man. It's funny because I was looking at the Software Underbelly comments, and so many people were like,
most of them were positive. Some of them
dude, there was no, I mean, there was a few people like, dude, this guy's gonna be good. He's gonna be fine. And yeah, man, I'm glad that we got in touch and we connected and we talked about this, and would love to run this back again at some point for sure. And we'll keep in touch, man.
Sure, sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Saul.
Thanks.
All right, see you, man.
See ya.